Okay, we're recording.
Okay, welcome everyone to our June 1st Education Policy and Direction Standing Committee meeting. This will be our first EdPol Standing Committee meeting via Zoom. Before we get started with our normal introductions and so on, I wanted to recognize and acknowledge the Squamish Mountain Songhees Nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. A couple of housekeeping items. So as it's a Zoom meeting, we are enabling public participation through an email address. So I just want to remind those out there that might be watching our live stream and want to participate via email that you can email the committee at edpolicy, all one word, 0601 at sd61.bc.ca. So that's EDPOLICY 0601 at sd61.bc.ca. So we would normally at this point go around the table and do some introductions. Before we do, I just want to remind everybody that we have a somewhat virtual table. So I think what I might do is introduce our staff, our trustee and stakeholder members. And if I miss anybody, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. Our voting members of the committee are the members of Education Policy and Directions. So that is myself, Nicole Duncan, Trustee McNally, Trustee Ferris, Trustee Ryan Painter, and we also have an ex officio voting member when they are with us, and that's our chair of the board, Jordan Waters. So you'll notice that trustees will participate, but only the voting members of the committee will actually vote on motions. So without further ado, let's start with some introductions. And again, if I miss anybody, please feel free to interrupt me. I think I can see everybody. So we'll start with the trustees around the virtual table tonight. So I will kick off. My name is Nicole Duncan. I'm a trustee and chair of the committee. Diane, will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, Diane McNally, trustee, member of this committee.
Ryan?
Hi there, I'm Ryan Painter, trustee, and my pronouns are he, him.
And I don't believe we have Trustee Ferris tonight, so at least I don't see him. And nor Trustee Waters, is that right? Okay. So we do have a couple of other trustees joining us though. Trustee Whitaker, welcome. And Trustee Rob Painter, welcome. So in terms of district staff, looks like we have our superintendent, Shelley Green. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you.
Deputy Superintendent Deb Whitten. Hi, Deb, welcome. And Deb will be assisting me in fielding all of the emails that come in with questions. So thanks ahead of time, Deb. Looks like we have Colin Roberts, Associate Superintendent. Hi, Colin, welcome. Mr. Greg Kitchen, Associate Superintendent, welcome. Nice to see you. Louise Sheffer. Louise, I know you're director of something. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your title, so welcome. Feel free to let me know.
It's just director of district team.
Thank you. We have Harold Caldwell. Hi, Harold. And again, director, learning teams?
District team.
District team, okay, thank you. And Mr. Davis, director of international student programs. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
So have I missed any, oh, sorry, and our secretary treasurer, Kim Morris. Hi, Kim. And of course, Andy Canty, our director of IT. Hi, thanks, Andy. Thanks ahead of time for all your technical support.
Pleasure.
Okay, so we've done our trustees, our district staff. Now our partners, last but certainly not least. So we have Jeanette Alexander from ASA. Hi, Jeanette, welcome. Jody Whiteman from BC PAC. Hi, Jody, are you on the phone tonight?
I am.
Hi, welcome. Feel free just to interrupt at any point. I won't be able to see your hand, so feel free to interrupt me. We'll be a little less formal tonight than usual. Jane Massey from QP. Hi, Jane, nice to see you. And do we have any more? So GVTA, I'm thinking, do we have a GVTA rep here tonight? I don't see anybody. No, okay. And what about VP, VPA? Do we have a Victoria Principals and Vice Principal Association rep?
Hello, Connor McCoy here. Thank
Oh,
you for
hi,
having
Connor.
me.
Yo, thanks for joining us. So again, it looks like you're on the phone, so please do feel free just to interrupt me if you want to add anything. And then of course our student reps. Hi, we actually have a section of our agenda tonight which formally introduces you, but since I can see your beautiful faces smiling back, why don't you introduce yourselves now? So Sienna, you want to go first?
Sure. I also just wanted to add in that if you're on your phone, there's reactions at the bottom of your screen. And so if you click reactions, there should be some emoticons that will pop up so that you're able to see. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But I'm Sienna. I'm a grade 12 student at Victoria High School. I'm in leadership and dance, and I'm really honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Welcome. Go ahead, Zoe.
I'm Zoe. I'm also a grade 12 student at Vic High, and I'm in leadership as well and dance. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you both for joining us. All right, so at this point in the evening, we usually move on to approval of our agenda. Do we have any changes or amendments before we do that?
Yeah, Nicole, I'd like to amend the agenda to add a motion if I could.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So the motion is as follows, that the board direct the superintendent to engage with IBPOC. IBPOC stands for Indigenous Black People of Color, members of the school community in the development and implementation of an anti-racism policy and framework.
Okay, and I think, Andre, you got the motion ahead of time, didn't you? So hopefully that you've got a copy of that.
I do.
Okay, so let's add that under C, new business, C6. Okay, thank you, Trustee Painter. Were there any changes or amendments to the agenda? Trustee Rob Painter.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll defer to your recommendations about where these might fit, if they're appropriate. One, I was hoping for an update from the Advocacy Ad Hoc Committee on the motion that was referred to the board. The other one I was wondering about was if there's been any kind of an update on the status of summer school this year. I realize don't quite fit into what we have on the agenda right now, but if there is a slot for them, that'd be great.
Yeah, certainly. Superintendent Green, would you advise us whether there is an update that can be provided if we were to add it into the agenda, maybe under C7 updates or something of that nature?
Sure, we can just do a general update on both of those under C7.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you, Trustee Painter. Any other additions, changes to the agenda before we move for approval? Okay, would someone like to move the agenda as amended?
I'll move.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. All those in favor, show of hands. All right, and that's unanimous. Thank you. Trustee Hensa, hello, welcome. Hi, did I miss you before? If I did during the round of introductions, I'm so sorry. A big welcome and wave for you.
Good.
Thank you for joining us. Feel free to yell at me, folks. This is the first Zoom meeting that we're doing like this, so there's bound to be a few things that I missed, so please feel free just to let me know. Okay, so do we have approval of the minutes? Are there any amendments or changes before we do that? No, okay, would someone like to move the amendments? Or sorry, the minutes? Yep, thank you, Trustee Painter. All those in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous again. Okay, so do we have any business arising from the minutes? Hearing none, we'll move on to our presentations this evening under, let's see here. Under new business, first, we've already introduced our student reps, and I'm assuming that Zoe has not joined us quite yet. Is that right?
Zoe's here, just our friend Hannah hasn't quite come yet.
Hannah, yeah.
No worries.
No,
she should
Hannah's
be here in
not
a couple of minutes.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so welcome, ladies, from Vic High. It's nice to see you again. So let's move on to our inclusion survey under C2, and I'll turn the floor over to Deputy Superintendent Whitten.
Great, thank you. So just before I begin, I want to thank Lisa McPhail for all of her work in launching the survey and then in collecting and theming the responses from the survey. I also want to thank the 2,400 people who completed the survey and shared their thoughts, their concerns, and their suggestions. I've provided the memo on page 8 as a summary of the survey results, and I'm not going to read the memo. I believe it's quite comprehensive in what we heard and what we received back. But I do have some comments that I'd like to just share with you, as well as just some other feedback that we've received throughout the year, whether it's from the Inclusion Forum, the Student Symposium, our learning series, the Learning Support Teacher series that we've offered, counselor collaboration, and any other venue. We always seek feedback from each of the events. The one thing that was clear is that there isn't one solution that if we implemented will meet the needs of all learners. This is complicated. It requires a structured and multidisciplinary comprehensive approach. And the team really takes this seriously as we plan in moving forward and we bring forward the information that we heard. So we heard clearly that staff, parents, and students believe inclusion is important, and that it must be adequately resourced in order for it to be true inclusion. We heard that personalized programming for students is key, and that being in a classroom all day, every day is not always the best option for some students. We heard that additional professional development opportunities for teachers, specialists, and EAs is important, and timely assessments and interventions for students is also key. We also heard that there are some excellent examples in classrooms, in schools, and at the district level that we can learn from and that we can grow from. The district team recognizes that we have work to do to ensure that all of our students have an opportunity to succeed in a meaningful and purposeful way. We know that we have passionate and skilled staff, parents, and students who believe that it is our duty and our obligation to both celebrate and fully support diversity in our schools, in our district, and in our broader community. The information captured in the survey that you will see in the memo, as well as the feedback that we have received from all of the other events we've done this year, which also include our budget events, will help develop our operational plan, and it will also help us to organize our supports for next year. We are planning to host an Inclusion and Diversity Forum again next year as a yearly event, as well as an annual survey similar to the one that we did in February. We need these things to both measure our progress and also receive feedback on the areas of growth and improvement in the area of inclusion and diversity. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have with regards to the survey results. Of the 2,400, I think we received truly 2,400 different ideas about how best to move forward, what inclusion looks like in our district now, and where people see us moving to in the future. And I do truly appreciate all of the feedback that came. We had a lot of feedback, and again, many thanks to Lisa and the team for putting that into a comprehensible amount of information.
Yeah, no easy task, I imagine. Okay, well, thank you, Deb. I really appreciate it. Why don't we move to some questions? But before we do, I just want to welcome Trustee Ferris. Hello, welcome. And Hannah, hi, I see you've arrived. Nice to see you, welcome. Feel free at any point if you have questions just to raise your hand and participate at your leisure. Okay, so I'm going to open the floor to some questions. We've got Trustee Ryan Painter and then Trustee McNally.
So I'll be quick. It's actually not a question, Chair. It's just an acknowledgement of all the hard work that has been done to date on this, and certainly all the hard work done by our very capable communication staff to bring all this together, provide us with the information, and really give us some solid pieces to look at and review as we continue on this inclusion journey. I think it's important just to recognize all the hard work that's gone into making this possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. Trustee McNally.
Thank you. Could I just request that Trustee Ryan Painter up the volume if you can? I'm finding that your volume's a bit lower than others, but maybe it's me. I have a couple of comments and then just one short question. It's really interesting on page 9. And again, I reiterate my thanks for this survey. It's really concrete information, really good to have. Thanks to Lisa, thanks to Deb, and thanks to everybody who helped pull this together. And I do look forward to that inclusion forum in the next school year. On page 9, it's interesting to note on question 7, do you think your child currently receives the necessary physical, socio-emotional, or academic supports? 61% of respondents were in the almost never, once in a while, and sometimes category. So clearly we have work to do there. And some participants expressed gratitude towards staff and positive experiences. That was 390, while almost 4 times that number, 1,231 had suggestions for areas of improvement. So those are observations that I take really seriously. So I do have one question on the next page, on page 10. Some of the key themes that emerged were, and then there's a whole bunch of points. So on page 10, the first point is more general than some of the others, and it's observations about behavioral challenges. I wonder if any member of staff could be more specific about what the observations were.
I can speak to that, just having looked at the pages and pages of feedback. We did receive feedback from parents around both their students' experience, whether they were a parent of a student who had either an IBI designation or challenges around behavior, and that they would like more support in the classroom. Or it was a parent who did not have a student with a designation and found that sometimes their child wasn't able to learn in the way that they would want to. And so I think that the theme being that people did comment on providing additional supports for children with behavior challenges, whether that was a parent of a student who had a challenge or a parent who was of a student who didn't, but that was the feedback that came through, is could you please provide more support for kids with challenging behaviors?
Thank you, Deb. So is there anyone on the phones that has any questions or comments they would like to add? No, okay. Do we, hi, Trustee Whitaker, go ahead.
Sorry, I did just have one question where you mentioned doing an annual survey. Do you think you're going to be doing that at the beginning of the year or the end of the year?
I think we would do it at the end or toward the end in a similar time frame as we've done this one. If we wait till the end of the year, then it's hard to implement even for the following year. So February, March, I think worked out for us to have this. It gives parents enough of an experience for that year, but it also gives us enough time to make some changes for the following year.
Thank you. And so when do you think you would time the forum? Would that be like just before, or?
I think October.
If we can do it.
If we can do it. If we can't, then we'll look at a different way to do something similar, where our focus is around the student engagement and the student voice in a forum. And I think October or November before we get into the holiday season, but one again where people have kind of come through September rush. So end of October, beginning of November.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Whitaker. I have a couple of questions around this. I'm wondering if you could comment on some of the similarities or the repeated themes that you're finding from all the different feedbacks, and not just the survey, which I think is very useful, but the forum, some of the feedback directly from staff through some of the training and the other staff surveys that you do each year. I'm wondering if you can sort of highlight for us some of those repeated themes, some of the things that, you know, it came across again and again and again.
I think probably the top ones are additional human supports or human resources. We heard clearly. I think we heard whether we call it professional development or learning series for teacher staff, for our QP members, and for our specialist or ASA. So learning opportunities there. We heard programming for students, whether it's low incidence programming or high incidence specifically for the IEPs, and we didn't hear moving back in a direction that we've sort of moved to, but we definitely heard that well, we heard clearly that students in classes 100% of the time isn't beneficial to anyone, and that's not what we have professed from the beginning, but we have heard that to create opportunities for kids to come out, pull out sometimes is just as beneficial as push in, and you know, looking at how we best service every student. There isn't a one fit or one model that works best, but there's a variety of things. And therefore, in order to have the variety, you need the resources, both, again, the human and the actual learning resources to make that fit for, or make that work for all students.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's certainly what came across to me just in reading the survey, but not having the benefit of all of that feedback that and the entire landscape as you clearly do. So thanks for that, Deb. And so then I'm thinking in terms of implementation and in terms of moving forward and the work of the committee, I'm wondering sort of what you envision, so moving into the fall and so on, as the teams start to develop the operational plans. We're looking at budget already. I'm sure there's going to be some need to look at budget again, depending on how those operational plans shape up. And so from an implementation plan perspective, I'm wondering whether the committee should expect that folks are going to come back and we're going to have a discussion around those later fall, or if you can give us a bit of an idea, that would be really helpful.
Sure. I think it's important to recognize that a lot of these conversations, as we looked at the different venues of feedback we utilized for the Equity of Opportunity Supplemental Fund, and as you look at what we put forward as recommendations for use of that fund, a lot of them align with what we heard. In fact, all of them align with what we've heard. How we look to provide supports in schools, where we see a real need in the K-3, there was a application of funds. Where we see a need for specialized programming, for EA professional learning opportunities, for staff learning opportunities, and also for our most complex learners. And so that, because it was the first for this year, we use this survey and other mechanisms to guide our plans for that. So that's one really concrete example of us already taking this feedback and moving forward. We have as you know, we have our strategic plan and we'll have operational plans. This information is important and critical in those planning. Our district team will be meeting over this month and into July about what plans we'll be looking at to launch for next year. Again, it all comes back into that, both in the staffing and into the professional learning that we hope to offer next year.
That's great. Thanks, Deb. Okay, so was there anything else around comments, questions before we move on to the next item? Okay, hearing none. Deb, I think you're up again under C3, grade 4-5 performance standards.
Okay, this will I'll start it and then I'll ask Louise if she has any additional comments to make. This has been a long time in coming and lots of conversations with regards to our grade 4 and 5 reporting. We started certainly a couple of years ago about talking letter grades for grades 4s and 5s. And this year looked at trying to, in the spring, have a very thorough consultation process around moving to proficiency scales or performance standards for our grade 4s and 5s and away from letter grades as a summative. Given COVID, we weren't able to complete the consultation process. So we will be having that in the fall, but we wanted the committee to know that this work is underway, that we do have flexibility with our reporting order from the ministry to move in this direction, obviously after a complete consultation process with our partners, but just really looking at how we rethink assessment and communicating student learning. The communicating student learning is what we see here with regards to proficiency scales, but the assessment and how we assess students is key to this. So this is a big endeavor. It's not just moving from a letter grade of a B to a proficient. It's about what do we assess, how do we assess, and then how do we communicate that to parents so that and students so that it means more than a letter grade per se. So the memo is there for your reference. We will come back in the fall after we've completed or are in the process of our consultation and let the committee know how we're doing and what we've heard, but just wanted to give you an update of where we're at and what we're hoping to do for grades 4 and 5. And Louise, I didn't know if you had anything else to add.
No, I'm good. Thank you at this point.
Okay. All right. Well, wonderful. Thanks. Let's open it up to some questions and comments. So I saw Trustee Rob Painter.
One question, as soon as I see a proficiency scale like this, and I understand that we're not simply changing labels, but I'm trying to compare this to sort of the meeting and exceeding terminology that we would have had in the past. And I understand that we're not looking for hard and fast dividing lines between like a developing ends at, you know, percentage, X percentage and goes on to whatever percentage. But could you kind of give us a bit of an explanation of how a parent would interpret this, or how I would interpret this, looking at this on you know, a mock student report card?
Louise, do you want to start or?
Sure, I'll start. I think that comparing it to the performance standards is probably the best way for you to begin to understand this new scale. We wouldn't want to compare it to percentages or letter grades, because these are broader areas of development, and percentages literally are within a certain amount of marks. So when you're extending your learning, that is the same as exceeding the expectations that were set out, usually established by using a T table, a criteria referenced assessment, or the kids are aware of what it is that they need to meet as far as learning expectations. And when they exceed those expectations, they're showing that they have a deeper or more sophisticated understanding than may be expected for their grade level or for their age. And when they're proficient, then that means that they are fully meeting expectations. So developmentally, they understand the concepts and the competencies that have been laid out for them that's relevant to their learning, and they have a complete understanding. When students are developing, it's exactly like the term that that's being used. Most of that they are just beginning to understand or gain a deeper understanding, and that their understanding is partial. They may not have all of the elements that were laid out for those learning expectations. And emerging is often just the very initial stages of learning, when you are looking at how a student is being compared to the established criteria or developmental areas. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thanks very much, Louise. The extending the proficient were pretty much what I was anticipating. Developing, yeah, I was kind of I was trying to get a sense in my own head of if a student is in developing, they're still they're not hitting all the points, but you can see that they have a fairly broad understanding of the topic, but there is room for further growth and development. Would that be reasonable?
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we look at the performance standards that we may be more used to, minimally meeting or meeting, not yet meeting, whichever sort of terminology you use for assessment, those aren't necessarily strength-based phrases. If you say that, so if you were to take me and teach me how to go horseback riding, and I would be an emergent learner. So but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm lacking a skill. It just means that my development is emerging. And so when you say that somebody is an emergent learner or a developing learner, it's much more strength-based in that that's just where they are on that particular continuum for their learning. Whereas if you were to say to me, if I were to say, I don't really know a lot about horseback riding, to say that I am not yet meeting your expectations as an instructor, it doesn't necessarily, it's not as rewarding in the fact that what we're saying is as you emerge as a learner, then you develop, then you meet and exceed expectations. It shows that they're going down a continuum that's strength-based. So it's a much more positive language to be using for our kids as they learn.
No, thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Louise. Trustee McNally and then Trustee Ryan Painter.
Thank you. I'm quite excited to see this come forward as a proposal for consultation. I think it really, using the scale really does speak to the reality of human development in terms of learning anything, whether we're very young humans or middle of life humans or older humans. I recall, being very competitive myself as a student and having very competitive friends. And it was, all about, why didn't I get a C+? And if I got a C+, why didn't I? It's, yeah, that forum is not really helpful for learning. And so, yeah, thank you so much for bringing this forward for our information. And I look forward to the unfolding consultation. I think it's a great direction to be moving.
Thanks, Diane. Judy, why don't you, I do see that you have a hand up, or at least an emoji hand. Why don't you go, I'm just gonna let Trustee Ryan Painter make his comment or ask his question, and then I'll go to you, Jody.
Thank you, Chair, but I believe I was just scratching my beard, so I'm probably fine. Thank you.
Did I jump the gun there a little? Thank you, Trustee Ryan Painter. All right, Jody Whiteman on the phone from VCPAC.
Hi, yeah, I'm quite excited about seeing movement in this area of competency management and tracking within that new paradigm of the curriculum. I've had many years of experience with competency management and training mapping through private enterprise, and I find it's quite exhilarating to try to quantify something that is inherently qualitative in its nature. One of the things that I would expect to see in some of the assessments is a definition of the kinds of behaviors that are experienced at each of the different levels of the grading scale. For instance, if you're an emergent rider, as was exampled earlier, one of the things is that you might want to articulate is at a beginner level, the person should be able to hold the reins in a certain way, and at each of the different levels that they would need to have varying behaviors that would go along with someone who would be competent at that level. So I think moving forward, we've got some good ideas coming out, and I think we can all work together to make this a positive experience for the kids, and make the any kind of scale rating or assessment level more understandable to the parents.
Thank you, Jody. Appreciate your comments. Trustee Ferris.
Thank you. I think I like the scale, and it's interesting. I like the way it's developed, but I don't think it will require any less communicating to parents what it means and how to understand it than anything else that we've done. Because you don't, I mean, for example, the merging the student demonstrates an initial understanding. Well, that could mean a lot of different things. So I just I don't know exactly what I'm looking for here, but hopefully when this is all explained to parents, perhaps they will cite examples, or something that allows the parent to know how this is going to fit with their child. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Ferris. Yeah, I suppose we're all sort of, well, a lot of parents, we come from generations where letter grades were always given, even letter grades as early as, 6, 7 years old. So I suppose there's a sort of a cultural element too, to moving away from that type of assessment. And certainly communicating and really gaining a deeper understanding of, why we're moving away from that type of assessment at those early grade levels. It would be definitely beneficial, bringing everybody along. Louise or Deb, did you have any comments?
Just, I think just to piggyback on what Trustee Ferris said, so much of what we do in a classroom when we're working alongside students is we co-construct criteria, and the entire conversation and that we have with them allows them to understand what it is that needs to be accomplished for that particular competency or concept that they're learning. And the co-construction helps to define that. And then within that is a continual process of self-assessment and reflection, or peer assessment and reflection to support their learning. So the end product is a proficiency scale, but the whole process itself helps to explain why they may be on that continuum. And as we work with students to explain that to them, we can continue to do the same thing to help parents understand that continuum as well.
Thank you for that. I just want to take a moment before we move on just to make sure we haven't missed anybody on the phones where I can't see your smiling faces waving at me. Were there any other questions? No? Okay. All right, let's move on. Thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. Look forward to hearing more about that as it develops. So we are moving on to C4, District Teams March to May recap. Louise, you're up again, and I imagine you have a lot to tell us. It's been a very busy time. So the floor is yours.
It has been an incredibly busy time, and I won't go into all of the details that are listed on page 16 in the memo. It's an extensive memo that includes a bulleted list of all of the work that our district K-12 team has completed really in April and May. So about 8 weeks, the last 8 weeks coming back after spring break. Our main focus, as always, as an entire team, continues to be supporting all schools for student success. And our main focus since returning post-COVID has been developing guidelines and supporting documentation that will support administrators, teachers, staff in order for them to support students. The team collaboration across our K-12 district team has been outstanding. And we have developed and co-developed a number of documents together that span K-12 curriculum and development, as well as different district departments, all in an effort to sort of guide, inform, and support the work at elementary, middle, and secondary. You'll see there's a list of combined district K-12 documents, all of which are mostly at this time connected with remote learning, sharing digital resources, how to access online resources for the remote, which is now more of a blended learning, and also access for those kinds of resources for teachers. And all of it is based on the continuity of learning guidelines that have come from the ministry, and then reporting guidelines that are developed from that. Then we have developed at elementary, middle, and secondary specific documents that are geared to the needs of those specific areas, and those are listed there in the memo. And then we have specific areas of need. So there have been several documents developed that connect directly to COVID and mental health initiatives, as well as looking at how we redesign our learning support structures, as well as how we're supporting students at home. And then our work in Indigenous education, pathways and partnerships, and technology for learning IT department have all had that collaborative focus, but it's specifically about how are we building on our resources and understanding new resources and documents so that we are supporting schools and student learning.
Thank you, Louise. I just want to open up the floor to any questions or comments anyone has about that. Trustee McNally?
Thanks, Chair. Wow, what an extensive document detailing so much work. I have one terminology question and one resource question. So I'll start with the terminology question first because it's easy. At the bottom of page 17, there's a district team ESW boat project in 15 elementary schools.
Yes.
What's an ESW boat?
Good question. Apart from the fact that this was a really fantastic project, this was a partnership between Pathways and Partnerships and Elementary. ESW stands for Essential Service Worker. And so any of the students that we had registered at the schools, we had 15 elementary schools that had programming running for our essential service worker children. And Pathways and Partnerships worked with a community partner to design a boat project where the kids received different templates about how to construct different kinds of boats. And then we dropped off templates and plastic kiddie pools so that they could float the boat and have different challenges and competitions across the schools. And we even had Zoom meetings with, we had a tour of a shipyard, and we had Zoom meetings with engineers. It was a really fantastic project, and hats off to Lindsay Johnson, who led that project and did a really amazing job, really involving all of our elementary schools at a time when kids weren't really sure what was going on as far as where their parents were or what school was going to feel like. And this really helped it to feel like it was a fun, welcoming place to learn and to be together.
Oh, thank you. That was brilliant. And a lot more to it than I thought. The other question is about halfway up. It's under learning support, and it's the last point, connections with intercultural association and settlement workers in schools. How many schools do have settlement workers now?
There aren't necessarily settlement workers that are assigned specifically to schools. It's usually through the school-based team, and the schools will reach out to the Intercultural Association to see if they can connect with different settlement workers depending on the culture and nationality of the families and children that will need that support.
Just one last question, follow up on that. Does George J still have a dedicated settlement worker?
I am not sure if they have a dedicated worker or not.
They did do, so we can find out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Trustee McNally. Trustee Rob Painter?
Right off the bat, this is pretty impressive. Like just going through the list of these things, there's no fluff in here, and it just goes and goes and goes. So my compliments to everyone involved. This is a ton of work and really, really important work. So thank you very much. One question I had just under Indigenous education, and I assume that it's here, but I don't quite see it. Just wondering about how we're connecting with our urban Indigenous population and just where they fit in the mix.
It's not listed specifically, but in meeting with local nations, and then also school-based teams are meeting weekly with learning support teachers and their staff who may be on site for Indigenous education. And I know that Craig Schellenberg and Shelley Mimi are in contact with all of the schools, just making sure that they're providing as many links and supports as they can. So the urban Indigenous students would also fall into those categories, but I didn't have specific information given to me for the memo.
No, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Louise. Do we have any other questions from folks on the phones? I see no emoji hands going up, but feel free just to unmute yourselves and let me know if you do have questions. Trustee McNally? What's that? You're muted.
Thanks. Just one more, if I may. Trustee Painter just jogged my memory, and I believe we do have. It's not INEC. It's not the Indigenous Nations Education Council, but I believe we have a district ad hoc committee that includes representatives from urban Indigenous. Well, it includes urban Indigenous representatives. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, or if the work of that committee hasn't started or finished, but do they have any, if it's still going and in existence, is there any liaison with that committee for the Indigenous education points that are expressed here?
Thanks, Trustee McNally. Superintendent Green, if you would like to respond to that question, please do.
Both committees are still up and running, and both committees have linked to both nations, city and urban.
And Trustee Ferris, did you have something to add? Okay. Sorry, you're muted, Trustee Ferris.
Sorry about that. Yes, there is a lot of interest from the Indigenous communities in that committee and in the work of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, thank you so much for that very comprehensive report. Let's move on to C5, and this is a motion brought by Trustee McNally on ad hoc committee reporting and so on. Before we get started, and before the motion is moved, I'm wondering if I wanted to move an amendment before we get started, but I'm wondering if we want to hear your rationale, Trustee McNally, and then I can move an amendment. Do you have a preference? Usually your rationale would come after you move it, but we certainly could hear your rationale and then I can move my suggested amendment.
Sure, why don't we put the motion on the floor then, and I'll read my rationale, and then we can hear the amendment. So I'm going to read my rationale so it won't be disjointed.
Yeah.
The initial page of the School District 61 website states the following: School District 61 board and staff values: engagement, equity, innovation, positive change, integrity, openness, transparency, partnerships, respect, social responsibility, and justice. Particularly relevant to this motion are the values of engagement, openness, and transparency. Engagement, because engagement increases with the provision of information for people to consider, and openness and transparency, because as an institution, the Greater Victoria School District and the board are responsible to the funders, the public, including specific stakeholders and partner groups. Progress reports of committees. Oh my goodness, I've lost a few people here. Progress reports are to be expected, I would think, in terms of openness and transparency. Listed on the district's website ad hoc committees page, the following ad hoc committees are listed as current. I'm not sure that they all are, but they're there. Aboriginal ad hoc committee, advocacy, audit, district facilities plan, equity, French advisory committee, public engagement, student registration and transfer committee. A linked page in the submenu of the ad hoc committees page takes one to a page titled ad hoc committee minutes, indicating that the board and the district did intend that ad hoc committees create minutes, documents, and publish those minutes. So at this point, the page has two entries: the equity committee minutes from May 13th, 2019, and the equity committee minutes February 10th, 2020. So congratulations, Equity Committee. The bylaw, our bylaw 9140 ad hoc committees of the board require a report when action is recommended, but this doesn't preclude progress reports. One example that I found online of an ad hoc committee reporting expectation from a school district is from Saskatchewan. That states in their policy, the committee chair or designate will report on the progress of the committee to the board and prepare a final report with recommendations, if appropriate, at the time for board consideration. So an ad hoc committee is an instrument of the board's creation, and the board can instruct the committee to report on progress. Robert's Rules states that it's appropriate for a committee to make what is called a partial report containing an account of work done to date, and is treated as any other report presented for information to its parent body and to the public. So in the interests of responsibility, openness, and transparency in relation to stakeholders, both internal and external, I believe this motion deserves the support of trustees. Thank you. Now I'm going to try to get my screens back here. This is not good.
No, thank you, Andre. I think Andre just was putting up your motion so that we could have a look at it.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to move an amendment to the motion. So before, seeing as we don't need a second at committee, wanted to move an amendment. I wondered, Andre, if you could put or post the amendment so that the committee can see. Okay, so what I'm proposing is just really understanding where Trustee McNally is going with her motion and thinking through how we might approach it. And my recommendation to the committee would be that we amend the motion to undertake to amend the bylaw 9140, which is the bylaw that addresses ad hoc committees of the board, to include the following procedural requirements: standardized agenda setting, the taking of a minute of all ad hoc committee meetings, and regular reporting out to the Board of Education through the appropriate standing committee. The procedural requirements shall set out that meeting materials such as agendas, minutes, and up-to-date terms of reference for all ad hoc committees will be posted to the district website. So really, I was trying to think of a sort of pragmatic way of addressing really a need to sort of standardize our board's approach to how we procedurally manage the input of our ad hoc committees, which are really just another, in our committee structure, are another means of funneling up and addressing recommendations to the board. So on that front, I'm wondering if we should open up the floor to some discussion. First of the amendment. Has everyone had enough time to have a look? Yeah, Trustee Ferris.
Sure. Yeah, I like the amendment. I like the idea of amending the bylaw rather than just making a motion. I really feel that the board pretty much does all of this already, but I think it would be good to have it in the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ferris. Do we have any other comments, questions, discussion on the amendment? Trustee Whitaker?
Thank you. So yeah, I do think that we are doing most of all of this, but I am challenged with the one piece that says the taking of all ad hoc committees. I think that that wording is a little bit problematic because a lot of our ad hoc committee meetings, there wouldn't be things to take they would call minutes, right? There isn't often these meetings are a dialogue and a discussion on a topic. So like out, maybe we can amend that in some way of there being a template for reporting out. I think it's important to keep minutes when the meeting lends itself to keeping minutes where you are making decisions and you know, moving forward in that direction where you need to track that. But if it's just dialogue that's happening and information gathering and bringing people up to speed, which often is, you know, what happened at meetings before, I guess I'm just saying, for me, I would take out, so maybe I'm making an amendment and I would remove the taking of minutes at all meetings but stick with the regular reporting out of all ad hoc committee meetings to the Board of Education. It's just the minute as you've defined it concerns me.
I've deliberately tried not to define minutes because I appreciate the fact that what happens at ad hoc committee is slightly different than what happens at standing committees, or can be slightly different to what happens at standing committees and at the board. So I was trying not to be prescriptive about what a minute would look like, but simply to really be clear that, you know, if we're going to meet in a formal setting, whether it's ad hoc committees or whatever the case may be, even if we're just having a general discussion for the purposes of communicating background materials or having a general discussion and no decision comes from it, in my view, from a procedural perspective, I think that we should note that we've met. I think we should note that, you know, what we've discussed in general terms. So it, you know, it doesn't have to be a verbatim by any means. And I think that there's some, I'm hoping in the way that it's drafted, that it leaves some room for that flexibility to minute as is appropriate considering the subject matter. But I certainly take your point.
Yeah, my concern is just, you know, what, that's all fine and dandy right now, that's our understanding, but 5 years out, if that's what's written in the bylaw, there can be confusion and people can say, well, you haven't actually done proper minutes, right? So that's my concern. It's not today, it's 5 years from now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're putting forward an amendment.
Well, I'm not actually part of your committee, so I'm just.
Let's just see, sorry, I'm just trying to flip through the list of speakers. There we go. Ryan, Trustee Ryan Painter, you had a comment or question, go ahead.
I did, and I actually have very similar feelings to Trustee Whitaker in that I really appreciate the intent of this motion, but I'm also a little bit concerned with the wording of taking of a minute, just given how ad hoc committees run. So she actually took the words right out of my mouth. I wanted to amend the amendment to strike the taking of a minute of all ad hoc committee meetings just up to meetings. And then just include the regular reporting out to the Board of Education through the appropriate standing committee. So just striking that line from the taking to meetings, and then leaving the rest. So I'll move that amendment to the amendment.
Okay. Okay, so let's deal with the amendments to the amendments. And voting is going to be a little bit tricky, folks. So I'm going to have to go through one window pane at a time to record your vote. So if you could just leave your hands up until I let you know that I've seen you all, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so thank you, Andre, so much for bearing with us. So we've struck the taking of a minute of all ad hoc committee meetings and left the rest of the amendments unamended. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment? Okay, so we've got 1, 2. Sorry, Trustee McNally, I didn't get your vote. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, so we have a tie. And so the motion or the amendment to the amendment fails. Okay, so let's move back then to the amendment. And would you mind, Andre, just removing the amendment to the amendment? I wonder how many times I'm going to say amendment tonight. Let's see here. All right, and so while we're doing that, if we could, oh, sorry, Trustee Painter. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to speak on the amendment now, and given that we're not moving forward with the strike through, I still do appreciate what this motion is trying to do, and perhaps an amendment will come when we come to the full board. But I do appreciate what this is trying to do, so I am going to support this just because I feel like it is moving in a direction that I think is important in terms of being accountable for what we do at ad hoc committees, and we'll see what happens when it comes to the board, but I'll support it for here.
All right, thank you, Trustee Painter, for your comments. Trustee Rob Painter, I saw a hand as I was flipping through. Did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, just to provide an alternative perspective. One of the points, and this came up, I can remember going through this very bylaw, 3-4 years ago. And the issue of minutes was discussed at that point too, and it was pointed out at the time that what a minute actually formally is essentially a record of the motions that were made, and it's not verbatim. In my personal mind, that should allay most concerns, but just to go one step further, I actually think that perhaps this is an opportunity for us to actually reconsider how our ad hoc committees function. Certainly what we want to have is robust conversations and dialogue around the topics at hand. But in my own experience, when I look back to things like registration priorities and a number of other issues that were debated and formulated primarily within ad hoc committees, the outcome of the process was that there was little or no available information for any trustee to take into consideration who wasn't actually at the meetings. Now, granted, we have been getting better about actually publicly posting when the meetings occur and such. At the time, there were real challenges with even knowing when a meeting was going on. And in that situation, there was very little information for trustees to do other than to simply acknowledge, oh, well, I guess the ad hoc committees thought about everything that I might have wanted to consider and move forward. So I think this is actually a great motion. I look forward to supporting it when it gets to the board. And I personally think that we should be looking at how we record the nature of the discussions in general terms, not going into any kind of verbatim set of discussions, but to ensure that the information that is being shared, the recommendations that are coming forward through committees actually have some substance behind them so that people can understand how it was that the committee got to the point that it did in its recommendations. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Trustee Painter, much appreciated. Okay, I think we've moved to that time where we need to vote on the amendments. So again, sorry folks, just bear with me as I scan through and record your votes. All those in favor of the amended motion? Sorry, Trustee McNally, have we lost you? Let me just scan back through. Trustee McNally, I don't see your screen, or your photo, your picture. There's no video. Would you mind just unmuting and indicating what your vote is? Sorry, folks, let's just bear with me.
Thank you. I keep dropping the screen here. It's terrible. I can see me.
Would you mind just indicating
in favor?
In favor. Okay, so that's unanimous. All right, thanks, folks. Much appreciated. Let's move on then. So we are now at C6. Trustee Painter, Trustee Ryan Painter, would you take the floor?
Sure. And Chair, did you want me to put the motion on the floor, or how would you like me to proceed?
Let's put the motion on the floor, and then we'll hear your rationale.
Sure. So the motion, again, for those tuning in, that the board direct the superintendent to engage IBPOC, BIPOC members of the school community in the development and implementation of an anti-racism policy and framework. So I have a bit of a prepared statement here I'm just going to read out. So thank you for the time today. First, the quote: "We must open the doors and we must see to it that they remain open so that others can pass through." That's a quote from Rosemary Brown, the first Black woman in Canada to become a member of a provincial legislature and the first woman to run for leadership of a federal political party. It's important to recognize before we start this debate that we are settlers on unceded and unsurrendered territory, the territory of the Lekwungen peoples of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. We continue to persist and exist in a system that was founded on oppression and attempted to extinguish a people. It will be tough to hear these things, and this conversation is going to be very difficult, but what we say tonight and the conversation we have must be heard. I've been thinking a lot about what privilege has afforded me and how much I've benefited from a system whose foundations are built upon the belief that some people are more valued than others. This has become crystal clear after numerous conversations, especially over the last number of days, that what we are witnessing across Turtle Island is the result of systemic and persistent racism. Without a head-on, intentional, deliberate effort to confront this racism, we are doomed to continue to repeat the mistakes of our past. We must remember to be mindful of those who suffered at the hands of an oppressive system that has encouraged the status quo, and one that I specifically and significantly have benefited from. Names like George Floyd, Regis Krasinski-Paquette, Jason Collins, and Stuart Kevin Andrew, and many others who have lost their lives for no reason must not be quickly forgotten in a bid to make ourselves feel better about where we are and where we live. The system of white supremacy constructed around us continues today unabated. All weekend, there have been conversations with friends, associates, colleagues, and especially amongst members of the BIPOC and IBPOC community here in Victoria to discuss what has been happening and how it is making them feel. One thing has become stunningly clear: normal and status quo is no longer acceptable. It's time to turn our attention to structural systems that exist and the oppression it willingly or unwillingly perpetuates. Let me be clear. This is no time to feel fragile about where we are or what we represent. We need to own where we found ourselves. We need to consult and engage, and then we need to implement radical systemic anti-racism change here in the Greater Victoria School District. My trusty colleagues, we have work to do, and this work has to start with us making a statement that what's normal is no longer acceptable. I hope you're going to support support this motion, commit to move forward in solidarity with our IPOC and BIPOC community who need us to act now. I hope you'll support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. All right, so I'm going to open the floor to some discussion. Superintendent Green.
Thank you. Truly resonate with the words in this motion and the deep feelings behind it. The meeting that we're going to be having on Thursday in regards to our strategic plan will also resonate some of these feelings and conversation that took place with all of our Indigenous communities. That was very deep, very rich, and very pointed in many of these directions. And so I would put one thought into Trustee Painter's mind and perhaps into trustees at this point, that I think on Thursday you'll hear a great deal about this area and our Indigenous communities, and very strong feelings about how they feel through the Indigenous Ad Hoc Committee and conversation that will go there, that will lead in this direction, that aligns with FINESC, with the new curriculum, with our code of conducts, all aligning to a big picture in this area. And maybe one concept we could consider before we actually move the motion is to go through the process of what you will hear our Indigenous communities are saying for us, especially to do with our strategic plan, and then perhaps move this discussion to our Indigenous Ad Hoc Committee first, to look at what we have in our school district, some of the key things and thoughts that our Indigenous communities truly wants to open discussion about. It's going to be very robust. It's going to be challenging, but I think there's going to be some incredible opening of conversation starting there, and they truly want to lead in this direction through that committee as an initial opening up of dialogue. So something to consider, timely for sure, but you may want to consider moving it in that direction prior to a motion about creating a policy and framework before that discussion has had an opportunity to occur.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Green. Again, I'm just scanning through to see whether there's anyone that wants to comment on the motion or on Superintendent Green's comments. Trustee Ferris, go ahead.
Chair, sorry, can you see me? You can't see me still, right?
I cannot see you, Trustee McNally, but
put me on the speaker list after Trustee Ferris.
Certainly will.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the intent of the motion, and I appreciate the thoughts of Superintendent Green. I would be very reluctant to support this motion. I really feel that if we're going to have a motion that affects our Indigenous community, I'd like to see it either coming from them or at least them being involved in the earliest stages of the conversation. And it certainly is an area, a subject which is addressed by the district now. But of course, you can't go far enough, I would say. But thank you. I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Trustee Ferris. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. It's weird. I can see myself, but I guess nobody else can.
I can see you again.
I totally, oh, yay. I absolutely support, the content of this motion. It's timely, and it's been timely for time immemorial, really. And I recognize also the benefits to myself of that have accrued to me because of oppression of non-white, non-middle class, non-cisgendered people who've paid a huge price for where I am now. I would like to, well, because of the complexities that we've heard here from our superintendent and from Trustee Ferris, and the fact that this is a really broad motion. I understand our situation on unceded territory and the specific oppressions that have got us here, on all the people here on the screen. But it's broader than dare I say, it's broader than our Indigenous community. Well, they're not our communities. They're broader than Indigenous communities. It's, I think of Dr. Lisa Gunderson, for example, whom I met at the Parent Advisory Council at Mount Doug. She's a university professor here at UVic and is very articulate about racism. Her children are Black and have experienced racism. So I'd like to see a really broad representation as we take this forward. So with all that preamble, I don't know, is it possible for me to make a motion to refer this to the Equity Committee? And then, of course, the Equity Committee can just refer it right back if they don't think it needs discussion there. But if we refer to the Equity Committee, we'll still have the motion energized and be able to hear what we're going to hear from the superintendent. So a motion to refer to the Equity Committee.
All right, thank you, Trustee McNally. All right, so here, yeah, Trustee Ryan Painter, I will let you speak to the motion to refer. And then Trustee Rob Painter, I have not forgotten you, so I will come back as soon as we deal with the matter of referral. So Trustee Ryan Painter, if you want to speak to the matter of referral to Equity.
I do, and I really do appreciate what everybody has said around the table. And as I said in my opening remarks, this is not an easy conversation to have. What I struggle with in terms of it being sent to the Equity Committee, and I'm not opposed to it, but what I struggle with is that the intent of this motion is specifically to hear from IBPOC and BIPOC members of our school community, which includes Indigenous, but it also includes Black and people of color. And if this motion were to be referred to committee, I would want to be, or pardon me, to the Equity Committee, I would want to be certain that the discussions that we were having at committee were inclusive of people that were IBPOC, Indigenous, Black, and people of color. That's something that would be really important to me, or else it's, you know, it's just kind of continuing a system of oppression that just brings us back to the board where there's been no, I shouldn't say no input, but not input that I think, in my opinion, would be appropriate. So I'm not quite sure where I fall on this, I guess is what I'm saying. I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say.
Okay, does anyone else want to speak to the matter of referral? Just scanning through again. If I'm missing anyone as I scan through, let me know. I'm not seeing, oh, there we are, Trustee Whitaker, go ahead.
You know, there's a button you can make everybody show up at the same time.
Yeah, there's still too many folks to show up at the same time on my screen.
All right. I would just like to say I agree with Trustee Ferris. I think that it's really important that the right people be the one pushing this motion forward. I appreciate what Trustee Painter is trying to do here. I think it is timely, but I think that a lot of conversations have been in the works over the last while. And I would hate to jump the gun and make people feel like we weren't listening to them in our overzealousness. So for me, I'm totally in support of it being referred to another committee, or I'm actually even more in favor of tabling it to a more specific time when there's more information that makes this a more fulsome discussion, rather, you know, that has all those stakeholder pieces to it. Obviously, I'm not really part of this committee, so I'm going to leave it, I guess, there and not make the decision as to where it goes. But I do think that this is something that you need to do walking in partnership, not ahead of these groups. And I think yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks, Trustee Whitaker. Okay, I just wanted to speak, if I may, to the matter of referral. I'm wondering to what extent, I think, you know, if in referring to Equity ad hoc committee, we can use that as a forum to really gain some further insight and further information about how best to proceed, how to include all the conversations or all the voices in this conversation, then I think there's some value there. I'm not entirely clear, and maybe Trustee McNally, you could clarify in terms of the referral, your thoughts on what you think can happen at advocacy or at equity ad hoc that can't happen at the standing committee level.
Sure, my thinking here is I just don't want this motion to, be, I can't imagine that our committee would defeat it, but I'd be okay with, Trustee Whitaker's idea to move postponement to a definite time. The reason I would like to refer it to the equity committee, and perhaps Trustee Painter could be, Trustee Ryan Painter could be an invited guest on occasion, or, I'm not quite sure how, I haven't read the equity TOR recently, so I don't know if guests are allowed, but I would expect so. Otherwise it wouldn't, I don't know, that sort of defeat the concept of equity. I think the discussion could be deeper and broader at the equity committee, because I do believe guests can be invited, and yeah, it's complex. So that's, I'm sorry, that's my rather incoherent rationale for referring it, but it deserves, walking beside and some research and new information from our superintendent, all that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I follow you. I see your logic. Trustee Whitaker, do you have something to add?
I would just say that I think I did, but yeah, I do. I would support that, it being tabled to a specific time. And I think that one piece that I believe that Trustee Painter is trying to touch and to address is we have a lot of students right now watching the news who are affected by what is going on. And maybe we could, get some information from Harold as to what are we as a district doing at this time to maybe support some of our students who are really suffering and are unsure about where their role is in their school and in society at this time.
Chair, could we stick to the motion just so we get that out of the way?
Yeah, let's just, so one step at a time here, folks. Okay, so we're going to vote on the referral in a moment. Then Trustee Rob Painter is on my speakers list. And then I think it's a great suggestion, Trustee Whitaker. And if Mr. Caldwell or Superintendent Green wish to speak to that, then I'll give them an opportunity to do that. So I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor of referring the motion to the Equity Ad Hoc Committee with a show of hands. Got one. All those opposed? Okay, and the motion to refer fails. Okay, so we're back to the main motion. I'm going to go back to the speakers list first. Trustee Rob Painter, thanks for bearing with us. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much. And I've actually found it really interesting just listening in on the conversation. There's no doubt in my mind that this is not the sort of thing that the district can try to, or the board can try to foist upon anyone with any hope for success. That this definitely has to be a collaborative and consensual, hopefully, process that will involve all members of our community who have, for whatever reason of ethnicity or heritage, have been subject to discriminatory conduct and practice in the past. In my mind, the big thing that we have going in our favor is that a motion at this point in time in favor of this still has to go through the board at the end of the month, which means that we can move forward with this and yet still be informed by information coming forward, whether it's through the strategic plan or through other initiatives, we have that time. And even once we do pass it, if that's my hope, that this whole notion in my mind envisions the development of a structure for moving forward to actually engage and, well, to put out invitations and find out how communities or individuals want to be engaged. I think there is ample room for treating people with consideration and respect, and inviting their participation in something that I think is fundamentally important. And I think we can take this step at this time without endangering any of that. And I think that I commend Trustee Painter for actually taking the cue from the horrible scenes that we are seeing played out on TV, and quite honestly, some of us have probably seen it in our own lives. Certainly not on the receiving end in my case, but I've witnessed it, and I regret not having done more at the time. I think this is a great motion, and I look forward to supporting it at the board. So thank you very much.
Okay, so I want to just circle back for a moment because I think it would be beneficial for the committee to hear from Mr. Caldwell and or Superintendent Green on what's happening in terms of our students and our district supports for our students at this point in time. So the floor is yours, Mr. Caldwell.
Hi, everybody. I'm not sure how much more I can add other than that we've been working all year on our social, emotional, and wellness pieces, which include our snapshots on human rights and racism. This was brought forward last year as well as part of ORA, which is the Organization Against Racism and Hatred, which we are a member of, and I attend those meetings on a monthly basis. Just to note on that, ORA has moved, it is a provincial body and has moved to a different platform, but with a similar program and connection with community. So one of the things we have focused on is that idea of what is racism and connecting our students to the human rights and what that means. And a big push in the last couple of years through the ministry has been our look at human rights and discrimination and how that has to be woven into our codes of conduct within our schools. And our students and families and staff of each of our schools have had input into those conversations and those codes of conduct as well. This has been a slightly different year with COVID in terms of the input from staff, from students and families, but that is still part of the order through codes of conduct and that discrimination piece and the anti-racism piece as well. So really the work focusing on how do we bring it to that broader audience and support students within the district that are struggling. And we have our partnerships with our community agencies like the Intercultural Association and our Swiss workers, and how do we build on community there in support of our students broadly within the district. So it is timely, and our current work with COVID is supporting all of our vulnerable students, which are included those that have been marginalized through race, for example.
Great, thank you very much for that. Superintendent Green, did you want to add anything further?
No, I think the discussion has been very worthwhile. Absolutely, do we all have strong emotions about the current status and what things are going on? I think it will be very important as we enter into this discussion, because we will be having it and we're at a platform that's appropriate. There's got to be some deep understanding of what the school districts, province, all the different agencies, the work that we do actually already have and do. Because if we're going to be looking at any of these topics, anti-racism policy and framework, the understanding of the baseline framework that we currently have and follow, and the input from each of our stakeholders who all have strong opinions about each of those components will be critical. So it will not be a short, quick engagement piece. It has to be on the right platform. It has to understand where all the other partner people and interested participants will be coming from. It's a very sensitive component, and however we decide that framework to look like and the involvement and discussion, it will be deep, important, and sensitive. So the planning of that will be critically important, but it has to be a baseline and discussion first. So great starting place, but I think all those things have to be considered before we set up a group that's going to carry this forward.
So can I just clarify? Oh, sorry, did I interrupt someone? I just wanted to clarify then with the superintendent in reviewing the motion before us. Is there anything in the wording of the motion that you think precludes, you know, ultimately you and the team who are going to actually carry out this work, should the board support it, that precludes you from undertaking that sort of initial groundwork to get a sense of, you know, how folks foresee participating, you know, how they want to do that? I'm sure there's going to be a myriad of different views and opinions about, you know, whether it's through an ad hoc committee, some of the feedback, whether it's through a feedback process and an actual consultation process of some kind, multiple processes. But do you think that there's anything in the way that this motion is worded that precludes you from having that necessary flexibility?
I think it's very directive. I understand the engagement process on these two descriptors to begin with. I can honestly tell you that our nations would look at that descriptor and feel excluded. And so I'm just very conscious and cautious right now of the consultation that we've done so far. This is a huge conversation and every voice will want to be a part of it from their perspective, history, and desire. And so I would just caution how we make this motion and when we do it, so that we are going in a great direction, a really important direction. But when we word this, it will be inclusive of all of our communities having a voice and an input on there. And it's likely going to have to entail probably its own committee, if you like, to be set up as an ad hoc to start this, because this is not small consultation, it's incredibly deep. And so even for me, looking at anti-racism policies and framework, they are tight and limited. And I can tell you right now that our Indigenous communities would look at those words, anti-racism policy, and think that may not be meeting their needs right now. So I just see it as a very broad piece. There will be lots of voices that want to be a part of this, and we have to take this carefully and slow to make sure that it's inclusive of all the opinions and ideas. I would look at the words that Trustee Whitaker stated earlier in this conversation, that it might be as concept is critical, important to something to move over. Do we want to table this for a succinct period of time, get some engagement with our strategic plan, have a discussion with trustees about how we broaden this particular motion to include all of our stakeholders that would want to be a part of this component, and then what is the goal of what we want to create with that, to create a very robust motion with that consultation underneath it. So I guess my advice is that we consult about what the motion would really mean and where we're headed to before we actually make it and solidify it.
Okay, so let me just stall that. I just want to make sure that we're understanding. And then Trustee Ryan Painter, I see your hand up and I'll go to you in just a moment. I just want to make sure that we're clear on our superintendent's, recommendation to us. So what I'm hearing is that when we look at the way that the motion is worded, that the concern is that there may be a sort of a stage one almost that would be beneficial to go through insofar as taking stock of, different groups that are affected by this, how, what they see are the priority areas, whether that's a policy or a framework or whatever it is, and how and whether they want to be consulted on this. Are you saying that something like that would really, in your view, be a sort of stage one before we get to the stage of being prescriptive about what the outcome will be? of that. Am I
I think
understanding that correctly?
Yes, you are. I think that'd be a valuable stage one. We want to make sure that as sensitive as this is, that parties are feeling like they can be heard and a part of this on whatever the initial integration is of people and their voice, and then the desired outcome before we even get to that space.
Okay, I'm going to let Trustee Ryan Painter have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the conversation that we've had to this point. I think it's been fulsome and engaging and important, and I sincerely appreciate all the work that Harold and his team have been doing to get us to where we are today. It cannot be understated how hard they've been working and how much engagement they have been doing, and I don't want this motion to look like it doesn't recognize all that work, because that work matters and it's absolutely important. I also agree with the superintendent that we and other trustees have said as well, we don't want to see this as putting a cart before the horse, although I'll note that it does say, direct to engage. There's no time limitation on the motion, but I do appreciate what the superintendent is saying. So my motion then would be to refer or to table this motion until the October Ed policy meeting. And I'd like to know if Superintendent Green thinks that that's sufficient time to engage with our strategic plan, have this dialogue that is so very important, and then come back to look at this motion, possibly amend it or something like that. But does she think that that's sufficient time to the October Ed policy meeting?
I think October is a much more realistic time frame. It can allow staff to reach out to the multiple of communities just to set the seed and see what their ideas are. That could come back to trustees in regards to next steps and the motion that you would have liked to make, but at least it gives us an opportunity to provide consultation with all of the different partner groups, because there will definitely be some conversation about how they would like to see themselves involved.
Okay, thank you. So I've got that motion on the floor then.
Yeah, thanks very much, Trustee Painter. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We're going to vote on that motion to table, but thank you, everyone, staff, trustees, and stakeholders for participating in that really important discussion. And thank you, Trustee Painter, for bringing your motion. So we've got a motion on the floor to table the motion at C6 until the October 2020 Ed Policy and Direction Standing Committee meeting, by which time we're hopeful that we'll be in a position to have a more complete and fulsome discussion about moving it forward. All those in favor with a show of hands. Trustee Ferris, I didn't get your vote, sorry. All right, all those opposed? Trustee McNally, what's your vote?
Chair, can you see me still?
I can now, yep. What was your vote?
I voted in favor of Trustee Ryan Painter's motion to postpone this to a definite time or table it until October Ed Policy meeting. I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you. So that passes. And so the motion will be tabled until the October 2020 Ed Policy and Directions Standing Committee meeting. All right, thanks everyone. So we're moving on to C7. We have a couple of updates that we added to the agenda. I will open up the floor for Superintendent Green. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I will pass over to Associate Colin Roberts, and he can update us on both advocacy and status of summer school.
The Advocacy Committee met today, and following the meeting, we're in the process of drafting some recommendations to put before the board with respect to the response to the motion come forward following the letter received by the GBTA that final grades for students be just either pass or fail. So I think at this time I would prefer to wait until the draft of that document has been shared with the members of the committee to make sure that we've captured the intent of those at the meeting correctly. But the the idea is that that will be available shortly so that members of the board can see those recommendations. With respect to summer school, we have been awaiting information from the Ministry of Education, so we're a bit behind our normal processes for summer school, and summer school enrollment and process will be on the agenda of the forthcoming Operations Committee meeting on Monday, June the 8th. But just to preempt that slightly, we will be looking at a blended model for summer school as required by the Ministry of Education. So we will expect that classes will be a combination of in-person instruction plus some remote learning. And based on what we've heard from our secondary schools to date, we see a somewhat similar range of completion courses being offered over two-week periods this coming summer, and that the session will be hosted at Mount Douglas High School. So a slightly reduced summer school, and certainly later registration processes than we've had in recent years, but we are expecting to have registration open this week and then be able, well, at the end of this week, and then close in by about June 15th. And because of the current circumstances regarding COVID-19, if possible, we will be looking to make that registration online. So at the moment, that's the cause for the delay, to see if we are able to have students be able to express an interest in taking those courses through an online registration process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to D, notice of motions. Do we have any notice of motions on the floor? No. In terms of general announcements, let me know if there are any, but I just wanted to check in before with Deputy Superintendent Whitten. Do we have any emailed questions, comments that we need to read out?
Not that I know of. I checked in with Andre, and she at the time said we had no questions come in.
Okay.
We
Thanks
still
very
have
much.
none.
All right, thanks so much, Andre. Appreciate it. All right, so do we have any general announcements? No. All right, motion to adjourn. Thank you, Trustee Painter. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.